As today we saw the first arrests of people associated with the scheme for which the president is being impeached. One of the things that is coming into clearer view is that as the president tried to enact this scheme to get Ukraine to give him help against his Democratic opposition in the next election, he not only had to enlist friends of Rudy, including a number of whom are either in prison or on their way to it, he also had to move people out of the U.S. government who were in the way of that scheme. People who were doing their jobs and were either prone to raise the alarm about what was happening or just wouldn't help carrying it out had to get pushed out. We know, for example, that the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, a career Foreign Service officer named Marie Yovanovitch, was suddenly removed from her position as ambassador because people like Rudy Giuliani had started a campaign to denounce her. And people like the president's eldest son, Don Jr., soon joined in. Here, for example, is a nice picture of Donald Trump Jr. on the left with the two guys who were arrested last night. That's the two of them on the right. The guy in between them is the man who at the time was heading the pro-Trump super PAC, to which those arrested guys had just given a gigantic $300,000 plus illegal donation. After Marie Yovanovitch was slimed by people like Rudy Giuliani and the president's eldest son with bogus allegations against her that had been reportedly provided by these two guys who have now been arrested, after she was recalled from Kiev, one of the interesting things about this saga is that President Trump never made an effort to replace the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine. There's no nominee for somebody to be the new U.S. ambassador since Marie Yovanovitch was sent home. Instead, what the president appears to have done is put in a different guy in Kiev in a sort of unofficial role, but it was definitely at the president's personal request. And he was sent in, apparently, to handle this very special situation that the president was cooking up with Rudy Giuliani and his big band of corruption fighters in Ukraine.
Now, concerning your title, you're the U.S. ambassador to the EU, but you've been spending a great deal of time in Kiev. Why is that?
Well, President Trump has not only honored me with the job of being the U.S. ambassador to the EU, but he's also given me other special assignments, including Ukraine.
He's given me special assignments, including Ukraine. That's Gordon Sondland on Ukrainian television after our U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, was sent home, apparently as part of this scheme for which the president is now being impeached. And Gordon Sondland does, in fact, seem to have been personally directed by the president to oversee his interests in Ukraine, including now what we understand to be those interests. Sondland, for example, appears to have been the one who pressed the Ukrainian government not only to open investigations into Joe Biden, but to make sure that they made public announcements about the fact that they were doing so, because it seems clear what the Trump administration wanted from Ukraine was the public impact of announced investigations into Biden. They wanted it to have a public impact and a political effect. So it was important that it had to be announced out loud. Gordon Sondland apparently is the one who delivered that message. Sondland also reportedly spoke directly to President Trump about the Ukraine scheme multiple times, including talking directly with the president on the phone immediately before the president made the phone call to the Ukrainian president, which is now the basis for the president's impeachment. Sondland also reportedly told Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson that, in fact, President Trump wanted a quid pro quo with Ukraine, that he was not planning on giving them promised military aid unless the Ukrainian government initiated investigations that the Trump administration was requesting. In the Washington Post tonight, Gordon Sondland is described as having blurted out at a White House meeting that Ukraine needed to start up some investigations, an outburst at a White House meeting that reportedly caused alarm among other national security officials. So this ends up being sort of an important part of the dynamic for how they carried this thing out, right? Trump wasn't doing this alone. He had to use the U.S. government to try to effectuate this scheme. In order to do so, they had to get the normal Foreign Service officers, the normal law-abiding career officials out of there, so they could instead, de facto, replace the Ukraine ambassador with this other guy who was apparently happier to be part of the scheme. I mean, in this case, Gordon Sondland was effectively put in to take over U.S. relations with Ukraine, even though, on paper, what he was supposed to be was the U.S. ambassador to the European Union. Ukraine is not part of the European Union. Why would he be the ambassador to them and then also have Ukraine tacked onto it? He also has zero experience as a diplomat whatsoever. He's a Portland hotel guy. He only got his ambassadorship after giving $1 million to President Trump's inaugural committee through a series of anonymous LLCs that were intended to conceal his identity as $1 million donor. Sondland was due to testify to the impeachment committees about his role in this scheme earlier this week. That was blocked by the State Department. Ambassador Yovanovitch, the person he effectively replaced after she was pushed out for not being willing to go along with the scheme, she is due to testify tomorrow before the impeachment committees. As yet, that testimony appears not to be blocked because she is still a State Department employee. She's still a serving Foreign Service officer. Some observers have raised the prospect that she might have to quit the State Department if she wants to, in fact, give this testimony tomorrow morning. That is, if Secretary of State Mike Pompeo takes steps to block her from showing up. But I want to point out this article that I think otherwise got a little bit overshadowed today, just because of all of the hullabaloo around these arrests. The Wall Street Journal today also reports on really another instance that looks just like this within this scheme, this dynamic where they have to get the real public official, the career public official, the technocratic person who actually knows what they're doing out of the way, so they can instead replace that person with someone who will be willing to be part of the president's scheme. According to this, I think, very important article today in the Wall Street Journal, Trump and Giuliani appear to have not only done that with the U.S. ambassador, they appear to have done that inside the White House itself when it comes to military aid to Ukraine. According to the Wall Street Journal, they replaced career staffers inside the White House who worked on budget issues after those career officials raised concerns about the legality of the president blocking this military aid. Quote, after career budget staff members questioned the legality of delaying aid funds to Ukraine, the White House gave a politically appointed official the authority to keep the aid on hold. Quote, after career staff began raising their concerns, political appointee Michael Duffy was given the authority for continuing to keep the aid retained. According to the Wall Street Journal, quote, the involvement of a political official like Mr. Duffy in the apportionment process is unusual. According to several former OMB officials, career staff have historically overseen the apportionment process, people with years and sometimes decades of technical knowledge of the funding process. All right, but that's the problem, see? People with years or decades of technical knowledge about the funding process and the legal standards necessary for holding up congressionally approved money, those, of course, would be inconvenient people to have in the middle of the process if you were in fact, trying to enact a criminal scheme to withhold money from Ukraine until they coughed up dirt that you could use in your re-election campaign against your opponents. And so after, according to the Wall Street Journal, career technocratic expert officials expressed concerns about the illegality of what the White House was trying to do, the White House took those people out of the process and instead installed this guy, Michael Duffy, to be in charge of Ukraine's military aid. Now, what's his background that might make him a better fit inside this scheme? He's the former executive director of the Wisconsin Republican Party. So maybe that's enough. That's perfect. See, they've got to get the real people, the career people, especially the people who know what's illegal. They've got to get them out of the way so they can instead install the $1 million inaugural donor and the guy from the Wisconsin Republican Party to be in charge of what is otherwise supposed to be the professional workings of the U.S. government. You have to get those guys into these key positions if what the new purpose of the U.S. government is extorting foreign countries that are supposed to be our allies into participating illegally in the president's re-election effort, in taking these wild swings at Democrats just to make Trump's re-election effort a little bit easier. The problem with this is that because they actually tried to enact this scheme using the U.S. government and moving inconvenient people out of their way, there's a paper trail. You idiots. I mean, the Wall Street Journal tonight describing a public document indicating the change inside the White House once they ousted the career people who thought this was illegal and instead installed their own guy. With Gordon Sondland being shoved in to run things in Ukraine after they ousted the real ambassador, there's a paper trail there, too. I mean, we've seen the text messages, right? As I said on the phone, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign. And this stuff is all written down because they tried to do these things through the U.S. government. There is a paper trail for all of these things. And you know what else there are? Witnesses, including the undisappearable true life stories of the real public officials, the normal, non-political, technocratic career staff people who were at multiple levels pushed out after raising the alarms about this illegal scheme that the president was carrying out or just refusing to take part in it. Marie Yovanovitch is due to testify to the impeachment committees tomorrow. Fiona Hill, top Russia aide in the National Security Council, is due to testify on Monday. NBC Tonight reporting on her intentions for that testimony. Both of those career apolitical officials will now, of course, come under disgusting attack from conservative media and from the president's allies in Congress and from the White House. They will come under incredible pressure to try to prevent them from testifying tomorrow and Monday. In terms of what happens next year, we'll presumably get efforts from the president and his eldest son to explain away their photos with the guys who have just been arrested in this scheme. The New York Times reports that the fourth of four men who were charged in this scheme today is expected to surrender himself to authorities. There were 4 people in total charged in this illegal campaign donation scheme today. Those 2 guys who I showed the mugshots of, they were arrested last night at Dulles. The third one was arrested in San Francisco. It has already appeared in court. The fourth one has been at large all day, but the New York Times is reporting that he is expected to soon turn himself in. We don't yet know who the Russian national is, who the indictment says put up a considerable amount of money that Giuliani's clients started spreading around to lots and lots of Republican entities and candidates over the course of this alleged illegal donation scheme. We do know that many of these entities and candidates, including the National Republican Campaign Committee, which is the Republican Party's national House election campaign committee. We know that the NRCC, the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy. We know Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and others have all made announcements already that they will return those funds or donate them to charity. So the news is coming in fast now. The Energy Secretary, Rick Perry, just got subpoenaed by the impeachment committees. The whistleblower who set off this impeachment proceeding has communicated to Congress that he wants to give his testimony in writing because he is so worried about his identity being unmasked by Republicans or by the White House. For their part, the impeachment committees now say they may no longer make public announcements about which former officials they're asking to come in and give depositions and provide documents. That's an effort to shield those former officials from pressure by the president and by the conservative media to try to intimidate those people out of providing their testimony. I mean, I don't know exactly what to do with this, but after all the big headline news yesterday that the president had retained former Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy to come back to Washington to lead his impeachment defense team, it appeared today that that fizzled out, and maybe Congressman Gowdy won't be doing that after all. I don't know if it's too late for him to get his Fox News gig back in the meantime, but it appears like he may not be going to Washington. The impeachment saga remains at its core as simple as it has been from the very beginning. The involvement of all these other people in the scheme is now proving to be a fascinating story and a criminal one as well. But this is basically the story of the people who tried to implement the president's scheme to get help from a foreign country for his election. As criminal charges start to be brought here, as other people start to fear legal jeopardy and career jeopardy here, let alone exposure and shame, more will shake loose. But the central allegation at the heart of the president's impeachment remains as simple as it ever was. Just a landmark day today. One of the reporters who helped unravel this thing from the very beginning by doing the first follow the money reporting that appears to have led to this indictment today, he's going to join us tonight, as will Congressman Adam Schiff, who is the lead on the impeachment inquiry in the House of Representatives. Big night tonight. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.